Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today from wherever you are in the world for this live webinar series called Next Wave, Young Leaders in Shaping the Global Seafood and Aquaculture Space. This is the first of a three-part series where we talk talent, youth, leadership, and the future. Our webinar today is titled Future Skills for a Changing Industry. My name is Andrew Richardson, and I am the founder of the Young Aquaculture Society, which is a free-to-join young professional network for those in the UK's aquaculture ecosystem. I'm joined by some really excellent guests, and I'm really excited to hear from them today. Before we dive in, we just wanted to extend a thank you to today's sponsor, Imperial 75 by Cargill. A few notes on housekeeping. Firstly, this webinar is being recorded. So if for any reason you have to leave early or you miss a part of the presentation, a link of the recording will be emailed to all registrants shortly. Secondly, the audience is in listen-only mode. So cameras and microphones will be turned off for you. However, the Q&A function is open to you. Any questions that you have can be added there. And will be submitted into the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. We will answer any questions at the end of today's session. The structure of today's session will be a quick talk by myself lasting around 10 minutes, which we will follow up with a panel discussion, and then finally the floor will be opened to those submitted questions. Before we jump into the first section of today's webinar, a quick word from our sponsor.
Cargill Branded Feed is proud to sponsor this series of webinars. Our foundational protein for premium salmon diets, Imperial 75, is a highly digestible, high-protein concentrate delivering performance without compromise. That innovation has since evolved into a global solution for other marine diets. Motive, developed exclusively for shrimp, is a functional macro ingredient that helps stabilize gut pH to promote growth and support disease resistance. Learn more at cargillbrandedfeed.com.
Excellent. So before we get to hear from those awesome panelists, just a couple words from me, maybe about the perspectives from young people in the UK. So next slide. I think that the first thing that we really wanted to highlight was that for many other food producing and primary sectors, the next couple of years is going to be maybe a bit of a real shift as true innovation and change is required to face kind of oncoming challenges. But for us, lucky people in the aquaculture sector, actually innovation is in our heritage. We're such a young sector that we've had to change and adapt and adopt new technologies really readily already. So we're actually really on our way already to kind of leading in that food space through adoption of many of these technologies. And I have here a couple pictures which I think are kind of emblematic of this from the Scottish sector. Salmon farming was a crofting diversification here, kind of small families on the west coast of Scotland started out on sort of wooden pens, and I get a bit of a chuckle out of seeing the car parked up on the side of the salmon farm. I'm assuming its engine being used to power something. And then we see today, the use of digital AI technologies to improve our understanding of fish welfare, fish behavior, feed technologies. The example we have here is from a Norwegian company called Tidal. So yeah, really dramatic shifts over relatively few years. And if we do see dramatic shifts, and I'm sure we will in the next kind of couple decades, then for us, it's not going to be a surprise. We're already absolutely primed for that journey, given where we've come from. Perfect. Next slide. When we're talking about the changing skill sets for young people or young leaders, I couldn't kind of get away from this idea that, I should go and talk to some people who work in HR. Maybe they have something that I'll find illuminating and that, I'll get to share with you guys here. So, I've talked to a couple people, and I think there were some themes that kept coming back and that I thought I would share with you all. I'm not necessarily sure you'll find all of them surprising, but I do think it's interesting that these are the themes I kept hearing. So the first one is that IT literacy is increasingly important across all areas of business. And I know you might think like, oh, maybe husbandry, people out on farm are going to kind of see that maybe not be as true for them, but I assure you, it absolutely is as true. IT literacy is going to be a hugely important enabler for people and their careers. The second was about the potential of AI and automation to reduce perhaps the administrative burden of roles. This was kind of this has a temporal sort of thing. Some people saying that actually, as these systems are set up, we might see an increase in administrative burden, kind of teaching and training and understanding how these tools are best used. But then in the medium to long term, perhaps we'll see them reducing the workload for people. And with that reduction in administrative burden, it could be that we see an increase to the scope of roles. So moving away from having individuals who have a very kind of not necessarily one task, but kind of one clear focus, that lightening of the load could see the scope of roles particularly broaden. And then finally, something that someone highlighted to me I found quite interesting was uh, in aquaculture, as perhaps in all kind of animal farming systems, uh, a large number of the skill sets required are defined by the animals that we look after. And those animals are going to stay the same broadly. So whilst, the tools we use and some of the kind of the IT literacy elements might shift, ultimately many of the priorities around sort of health, welfare, behavior, understanding, all that kind of stuff is fundamentally going to remain the same. And so whilst, we might talk today a lot about the changes, I think it's also worth highlighting that, HR professionals are still really kind of thinking that it's going to be, stably focused on the core priorities for farmers across their hiring projects in the next couple of years. Excellent. Next slide, if we could. I thought that we weren't going to get away from today without the mention of AI. It does seem to be all that anyone is talking about today, and I have to say that some of the young people in the team that I work with are using this really in quite a sophisticated manner already, far more sophisticated than me. I'm already starting to feel old. But I thought it would be fun to maybe ask AI what AI thought of the webinar and what it would like to highlight as being important, themes being important for the coming years for aquaculture young leaders. On the left, we have a picture. I asked Canva to draw us a picture of what the future salmon farmer will look like. Take from this image perhaps what you will about the strengths and weaknesses of some of these AI tools. And then the kind of bullet points that you see there are generated by Microsoft's Copilot tool. Um, it listed far more than this as topics that were worth discussing, but I thought these were the ones that were maybe interesting to pull out. Not least because I think they're quite relevant. We've talked about the idea of data literacy, IT skills, cross-disciplinary systems thinking. I mean, we could see that as being, the scope broadening that the HR guys were talking about. And then those final two about climate resilience skills and communication and community engagement. Um, it's maybe difficult to pin down exactly what it's trying to get across, if anything. But I do absolutely think that climate is going to play an important part in how the sector changes. So will define many of the skills that we need. And then the idea of communication and community engagement is something I feel quite strongly about. And I do think that young leaders in the future are going to need to take quite a lot of personal accountability and develop kind of communication skills to help to tackle some of the social license challenges that we at least see here in Scotland and I know some other regions of the world. So rather than that maybe being a purely corporate responsibility, I can definitely see in the future that transitioning to being something that maybe is also an individual responsibility and something that kind of young people in our sector have to sort of um, uh, uh, kind of um, take on the mantle of. So excellent. We're about 10 minutes in, and I've kept the limelight long enough with some of my thoughts, and I know you'll all be eager to hear from our excellent panelists. So if we can quickly change the thing there, yeah, excellent. Then I can go ahead and introduce our panelists today. So our panelists today are Sean Pennells. Sean joins us from New Zealand, where he is an active member of Young Fish Aotearoa, a young professional network for the seafood sector that aims to support and enable careers, building a community whilst they're at it. Sean has 5 years experience working in the Kiwi salmon sector and is currently completing his master's. Christina Zantiotti. Christina joins us from the wonderful world of science. She works as a freelance science communicator whilst completing her PhD at the University of Athens. Beyond that, she co-founded the Network of Women in Aquaculture, which is a social entrepreneurship initiative dedicated to promoting gender equality and inclusivity across the global aquaculture industry. She is also a steerco member of the FAO's World Food Forum Fisheries and Aquaculture constituency. I'm not sure how she finds the time. Linda Sams. Linda has worked in all facets of the aquaculture industry in both Canada and Australia over her 39-year career. She is renowned for her expertise in areas such as salmon farming production, applied research, corporate governance, and social responsibility and environmental compliance. She has also had the privilege to work with many rural and coastal communities and numerous coastal First Nations over the span of her career and as a board director is currently working with and developing Indigenous science and research through a specific organization. Anyone in the audience struck with a sense of inadequacy following those introductions, I can promise you, you are not alone. Um, Excellent. So now we've met you all. I'm excited to hear from you all. Sean, I guess a good place to start the conversation is maybe trying to understand young people. What do you think young professionals in the seafood industry and the aquaculture industry, perhaps more specifically, want from their careers?
Yeah, I guess the main thing talking with other young people in the industry, and I don't think it's just young people, but a sense of purpose, meaningful work is what we're doing in our careers. Is it contributing to making the world a better place? Yeah, I definitely think that's probably the biggest thing that we all think about when picking a job or working in the aquaculture industry. Um, the other thing's more focused on ourselves is this job that we're doing, am I gaining important skills? Is there a lot of career development and progression? Do I see myself being able to climb up the ladder, gain more skills? I think that's really important as well. And then also can't get away from mentioning financial sensibility. Is it practicable? Is there a good work-life balance? Is there flexibility? Especially in these times, I think, especially in my job, the ability to take on extra hours, but also take time off and really have that work-life balance. I think are the key things at the moment.
Excellent. We're not a picky bunch at all. No, I think we see that a lot. People talk about the importance of values to young people. Are there any values that you think are specifically Kiwi that you think maybe, aren't as reflected in other places or anything on that list that you think your friends in New Zealand kind of, that is kind of sort of defining for them?
Obviously, New Zealand, huge food producing country, and it's not just our food; it's the quality of our food. So I think ensuring that what we're producing is of top quality. I mean, that's how we compete on the market. We're a tiny
Hmm.
country. We need quality food, but it's also grounds that sense of purpose is what we are doing, creating a really good quality product. The other thing that New Zealand's obviously very focused on is our environmental sustainability, or the environment is what we're doing aligned with those sort of values, those environmental friendly values, and keeping our clean green image.
No, totally, absolutely. The silver fern is kind of sold on those kind of core principles that you've outlined there very, very clearly. Christina, we've heard a little bit from Sean about what drives young people. How do you think companies and organizations can help to meet those young people's expectations for growth, giving them purpose? And, Sean mentioned also kind of things like impact.
Thank you, Andrew. Also, I would like to take the opportunity to thank you for inviting me in this webinar. So, picking up on what Sean said, I also want to obviously highlight the fact that we, the young people, are looking not just for a job, but for a purpose. This was really something that we could verify in my network of women in aquaculture journey, I could say, because in our first steps we ran a survey, and what we found out is that most people that responded in this survey highlighted the fact that they joined this career because they love the sea and because they want to bring change in the world. So what I would say is that young people want to see real world outcomes by their day-to-day work. So I think it's important to separate the fact that growth does not mean only a promotion or how you rapidly you scale up in your career, but it means that companies should offer opportunities for training, as Son said, opportunities to for exposure, to have some experience in different stages of the value chain. And when it comes to impact, I think it's important that young people are involved in innovation projects or community engagement projects. And in this way, they kind of feel heard, trusted, and they get a sense of purpose in their career.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. I think one of the things I found really validating about my career has been the opportunity to travel and meet and talk to people from a wide variety of backgrounds and kind of production centers. And I'm not sure that I'd be as kind of career motivated and passionate about my job and my career if I hadn't had that opportunity. And it's not immediately obvious that that would be something that would make necessarily grab someone. Um, Linda, across your career, you'll have mentored and cultivated a wide range of young pros. How can early career development opportunities serve as both a kind of a retention mechanism, but also recruitment magnet, getting new talent into your
Yeah,
organization?
yeah. I think presenting opportunities and is very important. And before I go on, thank you, Andrew, for having me on here today, and thank you to everybody that's listening. It's music to my ears already, what I'm hearing from Sean and Christina. Yeah, well, let me just start with the first one, I guess, and it's an important piece going forward for retaining and recruiting youth talent or just talent in general is when I first started, it was many, many years ago, and inclusivity was an issue from a gender perspective. And I think there is still work to be done in that space. And, having Christina on here is meaningful from that perspective. And I think that what I really want to share is that it's still important. And, I'm not limiting it to gender because I think we're going to see increasingly multicultural workforces. And with that comes, and I'll talk about that a bit later, where I think the skills that are required on that. But that is going to be important that we provide a safe and attractive workspace, especially when people are working in remote or isolated areas. And in British Columbia, in Canada, as I know it is in other areas, but it's a focus here with many of the First Nations partnerships. We have to have that cultural awareness too and
Hmm.
provide a workplace that is alive to that. not only to support our First Nations employees and leaders, but to also create a comfort and a network of understanding in our existing employees and employees from other cultures. So I think that inclusivity thing is a really important. And before I move off of this topic, I just want to say that, it's an old saying, but you make your own luck. And I think if you see an opportunity, you need to grab it. And sometimes that means taking on a task no one else wants to do because nothing profiles you well than you tackling something that's pretty unattractive to a lot of other people. And early in my career, I did have to do that to prove myself. And then your comments on innovation and the pace that things are moving. Yeah, we are a young industry, and we've seen a lot of change in the last little while. But we actually have seen a lot of change from day one.
Mhm.
So that creates an attractive industry for people that want opportunity. So communicating that more and making sure that people are aware of that is probably critical.
I mean, I think that
Mm,
cultural sensitivity point that you touched on, different people will want different things. I
mm,
shared something about myself loving
mm.
travel as a part of my career.
Yeah.
But when I was in BC recently, I had the opportunity to talk to Chief Dallas, and I was sort of highlighting, you know, how positive my career had been because of travel. And he was kind of
Mm,
sharing that actually maybe in the First Nations community, that
mm,
might not be seen as the first thing you want to promote because there's definitely sort of um I don't know, there has in the past been this kind of like thing where, young people from those communities would go either by their choice or not, and and maybe return and not feel or necessarily be able to be quite maybe as integrated as those communities would have liked. And I think, I know that's a very sensitive topic, and I might be absolutely massacring it there, but I'm sure he'd
No, no,
forgive
you
me.
got that. No, you have that correct. And again, leaders that understand their team or their employees from a human perspective. And I think we'll get into that a bit more later. Yeah.
No, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, so, Sean, New Zealand's got some pretty big ambitions in the aquaculture space, maybe notably a government that's hugely supportive, setting the target of kind of tripling the value of the aquaculture sector in quite a few number of years. I don't want to say 2030, but it could maybe be 2030, if I'm remembering correctly. That huge target is only going to be met by inspiring like a wide range of young people to kind of, the call to arms to come and join the sector. Do you think that companies and regulators are doing enough to upskill young Kiwis and kind of get the workforce ready to meet that kind of awesome growth challenge?
Yeah, it's a pretty significant target for us. And yeah, you're correct. By 2030, um, I hope we get there. It's looking a little bit difficult at the moment, but yeah, as you said, there's a lot of challenges that come with that. Uh, from a company point of view, I think it's becoming pretty clear that we have lacked succession plans, especially upskilling the young people in the workforce. Obviously, there's going to be a whole bunch of new management roles or upper level roles that are going to be need to be filled, and I think companies starting to look at themselves and go, why haven't we upskilled our young people in preparation for these opportunities? Uh,
Hmm.
and then, of course, as they usually do, governments fully supportive of us, but they haven't exactly provided the legislative landscape for us, and it's been really difficult to navigate that. And that stress definitely filters through companies. They're spending significant amount of resources just trying to get. I mean, one of the big focuses in New Zealand is going offshore open ocean farming. Just the legislative framework along, getting that into action has been significantly challenging. I just think that stress always filters through companies and yeah, down the line.
I
Yeah, I
think that
also think that
idea of, oh, go on.
as you're talking about in the start, just the adoption of modern technology, I think we're pretty slow on as Kiwis. Looking overseas, you guys have got a lot of technology that we perhaps don't have, just being on a smaller scale.
I think what I rudely interrupted you to say was that I think I'm going to steal that idea of stress filtering through organizations. I haven't heard it phrased in that way, but I think that's a really good way of kind of You know, maybe when companies are feeling comfortable and they're able to invest and they feel confident in their future, that emboldens them to support, those succession plans, which are obviously kind of that long-term thinking is maybe is linked to that sort of comfort or lack of stress, as you put it. You kind of maybe identified some challenges. Is there something that you'd like to see more of, companies doing more of, or regulators doing more of to support young people?
I just definitely think upskilling the people within your company and just working on retention. I think one of the things we struggle with is people bouncing between either companies or just moving outside the sector, from a lack of progression within their careers, and not really seeing anywhere to go.
And do you think that, your organization, Young Fish Aotearoa, is looking to kind of plug some of that gap? Is that one of the kind of the motivators?
100%. I think that's sort of where it stemmed from. That and a sense of sometimes we feel pretty lonely as young people in our industry. But yeah, definitely our main focus is in young fish, that retention of people within the sector. It doesn't have to be within a company, but definitely within the sector. And also recruitment. We do a lot of recruiting events, going through high schools and stuff. It's surprising the fact that we are trying to become this $1 billion industry in New Zealand, but not many people have actually heard of aquaculture or thought about aquaculture. We're definitely an agriculture focused country.
Hmm.
Yeah, and it's very, very surprising how many people have never considered aquaculture. I mean, I'd never considered aquaculture until I did a field trip, and then I changed my degree straight away when I saw a salmon farm.
Excellent. I was talking to some young farmers in New Zealand, and they were saying that the young farming competition used to be published, like used to go out on TV. Maybe Young Fish Aotearoa, that gives you something to aspire for, is a spot on prime time. Uh, we can maybe talk a little bit more about how we get new talent in, and balancing that need for talent with industry experience. I think there's maybe this kind of maybe a feeling of risk that if we're kind of changing quickly, we'll kind of forget what we already know. Um, Linda, like we'll talk about the changing skill set requirements in a sec, but why is operational biological experience, still essential for kind of future innovation and not something that we should be ready to put down?
Yeah, yeah, I think it is important. You were talking about we can't escape the AI buzz that is out there, but in reality, it is proving a very important tool. We are seeing it in genomics and our ability to apply it to biotech as well as operational opportunities for profiling the environment to having more accurate size ranges for our fish when they go to market and for lasering off sea lice. Like it's all over the place and it's actually very interesting. But to be able to actually build scenarios or model outcomes or even do your business cases, right? Like we really have to understand the biology in order to make the correct assumptions. We're still in that visioning stage of what this kind of digitization, big data, artificial intelligence is going to do for food production. And to do that, you need to plug in those biological assumptions and steady states, right? Like really need it. The other area where I think it's going to be very important is because many of us farm in the ocean and are quite reliant on it, so it's making the decisions day to day for us. And in order for us to be able to track the change, which can be happening very fast, I know where Sean is, we're seeing rapid ocean changes, but we're seeing it out here as well. And small changes in trophic level, there's small changes at the trophic level are having big impact on our farm salmon too. So being able to, again, we have to validate and calibrate models. If we're going to model and understand and forecast risk, we still need to go out and do the physical work. So that knowledge is not going to go away, but now we have these wonderful tools that are more accessible, can be used remotely, can be used by more people, and can be done more cheaply. So I think it's a really exciting time. And yes, you can't lose sight of that. That's still critical.
Hmm.
But however, all the young people listening, once you have large data sets, once you have accurate information, then we can challenge some of the old assumptions and we can challenge some of the, well, we've always done it this way conversations. So see it as an opportunity, obviously do it respectfully, but there's that aspect to it as well.
Whenever I go to a fish farm, I'm always impressed by the guys kind of, you talk to them about, oh, how are the fish doing today? And they'll be able to, even quite early in the morning, be able to give you like quite a firm indication of, how they perceive the fish to be behaving and what that might mean. And, whether that means that, there's a, uh, maybe predictions about what that means about water quality or temperature and all these kind of things. There's a lot of knowledge wrapped up in people who have spent, their whole career pen side. And I think specifically how you match that knowledge to sort of these big data sets is going to be how we make these big advances, right?
Yes, and I need to say this, sorry, I know I've taken a lot of time, but it's a passion and what I'm working on right now. It's important as we incorporate Indigenous knowledge into Western science, and that can be their current knowledge, their current biological work, or historical. You can't lose sight of the value of that, and
Mhm.
that'll be a challenge going forward, but a good challenge on how we manage to mesh those two worlds and get a better outcome for everybody involved. Sorry, I just had to throw that in there as a bit of a plug. Yeah.
No, I think it's a really important point. And even if it's not necessarily something that relates directly to the biology of the animal, understanding the seas and the coasts near you, I mean, what the baselines are historically and how they're changing is something that, if the data set's only a couple of years old, even if you were to understand all of it, you wouldn't be able to pull that apart. That kind of historic knowledge is really important. Christina, NOAA looks to support women of all ages and backgrounds, so maybe a bit different to kind of Yas and Youngfish Aotearoa. So based on your experience of trying to kind of bridge that gap and communicating to all ages, how can industry kind of support the building of bridges and, encouraging, experienced professionals to support, mentor the new generation entering the sector? What have you learned?
So I think, as you said, mentoring is one of the most powerful tools that we are currently having in our sector. I mean, experienced professionals have a deeper knowledge, a deeper operational and biological knowledge than the youth, whereas the youth often brings new ideas, technology. They are better in communication. They handle social media. So I think we should consider mentoring as a two-way exchange. So where experience meets new ideas, and it's a way where both the mentor and the mentee are getting benefits. But apart from that, what we have found interesting is that organizations, when they create spaces that are safe to share knowledge or experiences, or when project meetings are mixed, uh, things like that help the youth feel more safe in the working environment.
And through that security, more engaged in learning and all this kind of stuff. I think you kind of I was going to follow up. I was feeling really smarmy because I was like, oh, I'm going to raise the fact that I think it should be a two-way experience. But you've absolutely, you crushed that straight away. But how do you then match the right mentor to the right mentee, right? It's not, it can happen organically, and that's great. But if we want to encourage it, producing structures that encourage it is maybe the way to do that. But then how do you find, those two perfect parts of the yin and yang, who are going to get on and build a relationship? Any experiences?
So from all the mentoring that I have done up to now, both as a mentee and as a mentor, I mean, usually what is taking place is a match uh, based on backgrounds, professional backgrounds. But apart from that, what I think it's more useful is that this relationship kind of is open and clear with clear expectations, because sometimes maybe the mentor or the mentee are not a good match. So it's better that, for example, the mentor proposes another person as an example. But the problem in this kind of relationships, I find, is that expectations should be set clear from the beginning. We should kind of separate also the concept of a mentor from the concept of the teacher, because a lot of times mentees kind of believe that the mentor is going to solve all the problems of the world, but this is not the truth. So the mentor is there to kind of listen and then advise. So this is what should be done, and then act on feedback. So based on feedback, both in terms of the mentoring session, but also from the relationship part, I think is the most important. This kind of matches should be open and clear.
Yeah, I think when we started Jas, we also did a survey and we asked what would people like to see from a youth organization, and one of the things people said was a mentoring program. And to be honest, we haven't launched it yet, and one of the reasons is that it's that finding of the right partners. And I think some of your insights could be I'll be scribbling down and taking on as Jas explores this idea of structuring those relationships for people. So Sean, New Zealand, the scale of your sector, you've touched on it already, is is a bit smaller than maybe say Norway, Scotland, Chile, certainly if you're looking just at salmon, although of course with shellfish, your green shell mussels is quite large. Um, do you think that having a small sector has improved this kind of cross-pollination of knowledge between the old and the young, or has it created silos? Like what's your kind of perception on that? Has the size of the sector impacted this trend?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that question quite a bit, and I'm not sure whether it works in our benefit or against us. It definitely feels like there's silos of ideas, and it just feels like there's almost the old and the new, and it just seems like there's a pretty stark contrast in our sector. I'll also say this is just the history of salmon farming in New Zealand. I know Linda's touched on it. We're starting to face some real big challenges, but historically, we've had a pretty easy run. We've got phenomenal environments, really good water. We really haven't dealt with any diseases or lice. And I think that sort of historic, I don't want to say easygoing, but that historic lack of challenges has really made that older generation have just seen that all the way through, and they're not quite in a position to pivot yet. And we really need to start thinking about pivoting very quickly. And I think that's a challenge that we're facing at the moment is just the lack of challenges in our past meeting rapid changes right now. And yeah, preparing for that.
Nice. It's one of those really it's a great soundbite. It sounds easy to do, but putting it into practice is going to be really challenging. Do you think there's a social element to that? Is it like integrating those personalities on a social level that would drive it, or is it what's the sort of how would you sort
Yeah,
of what would be your step one in that plan? What would be a step one?
well, I think both Linda and Christina have touched on it is integrating that expertise that everyone's had with the data. Um, I mean, I was brought into my job a couple of years ago, and we've got no data, no historic data. Essentially, it's all just based on feel so far. Um, and the sort of older generation, yeah, really work well when they've seen data that confirms what they're talking about, but also in saying that when they see that it confirms, and then when I can also point to the data when changes are happening, I think that integration with that expertise and the data is really crucial to make quick pivots.
So like using data as part of the storytelling, but rather than as the kind of core principle, using it like wrapping it around kind of stories.
Yeah.
Linda, crack on. I can see the microphones come down. I'd love to hear it. What's
I was just getting ready for the next question. But those are extremely wise words from Sean. And if there's people on this webinar, which I suspect there will be, and probably they're on it because they are good leaders, is that of my generation, everyone wants to feel heard and relevant, right? And that multi-generational um, meeting of the minds is so critical for leadership teams. And I really applaud that approach, Sean. That is absolutely right, because people are humans and they want to be heard and they want to be valued. And every generation wants that. And as you age, as someone who's at that point in their career, my greatest joy has been working with younger people and be able to see where things are going next. So right on, Sean.
Right on, Sean. Words to
Right
live
on,
by,
Sean.
perhaps that the catchphase of the
I'll work
webinar.
I'll
Webinar, I
work
love it.
groovy in there somewhere at some point.
Yeah. But across your career, Linda, you'll have seen the skills required for success
Yeah.
change and
Hmm.
evolve.
Yeah.
Like how do you think that's going to continue? Are
Yeah.
we good predictors of that change, or is it that, in a couple of years' time we'll look back at this webinar and go, oh God, we thought we had it, we were discussing what it could be, but we were
Yeah.
wrong. How good are we at predicting those shifts, and what kind of shifts have happened across your career?
Yeah. Well, you'd really touched on it on your intro, about the AI and the robotics and that kind of thing. And I think I'm going to go on to a different tangent because we've talked about that a lot. Let's talk about the soft skills, right?
Love
Leadership,
it.
management skills. And oh my gosh, in the early days, we were really woefully short on that. And I think we're still feeling the repercussions of it. We had biologists, scientists, fishermen. We didn't have people that had management skills, and we quite often were tossed into management roles, right? Just if you were on the ball, that was it. You were in management. So, over the years, I think that thoughtful managers have upskilled on that. But I think that is something people can't lose sight on. Especially for the changing workforce that I talked about. So those leadership management skills, those matter. The digital literacy, we talked about that, the financial literacy. Yeah, that's all important. We're seeing shifts happen in our global economies and that sort of thing. So if you're thinking of going into a leadership position, yeah, absolutely, you need to pay attention to that in the political geopolitics, but also is complex problem solving. Right? Because our world is becoming more complex. I don't care what anybody says. It is harder now for younger people in business. It's not as straightforward, and they need to be able to, I like the word pivot. They need to respond quickly to changing circumstances. And what's happening with the tariffs now in the U.S., right? Supply chain disruptions, thinking on your feet, and you're again mostly in remote coastal areas. We just had a road washout. We had to rethink, how fish were going and where they were being processed. So there's lots of things to do that can build those skills. And with my team, when I had my different teams that I've had over time, I did teach strategic thinking and complex problem solving and mentored on project management. Like, don't underestimate those kind of execution skills. I think those are going to be needed, and I don't believe they're being focused on enough. We all get pretty excited on the tech and all that stuff, but somebody's got to make it work, right? And you got to bring a team with you and make sure they're happy. So, and I'm just looking, communication and collaboration, another soft skill, massively important in today's
Mhm.
world. We're all attached to each other. You have to collaborate. That is going to be the success. This kind of ruthless winner takes all business models, that's slowly becoming a thing of the past, in my opinion. Adaptability, flexibility, yeah, and understanding public demands. That was another one I had written down. Yeah,
And do you think that some of those soft skills, in your experience, is that best learnt in-house, where, the examples and the training will be maybe absolutely related to the topic, to the exact business case because it's in-house?
yeah,
Or do you think that there's merit in sort of third-party training, in sending people away to gonna go on a 3-day course? Like,
yeah.
how would you balance it? How would you
Both.
mix
Yeah, I
those?
think both. And Christina, she's shout out to her too, because that mentoring has an important role, but mentoring has to be done in a disciplined way as well, which she pointed out very aptly. Yeah, I think both. And read, people. Read books. Like, you don't have to be read them on paper like I do, but you can read them electronically. But keep up on your reading. I think that is another piece. Yeah.
I'm uh read fiction, but I listen through Audible to non-fiction. So
However you do it. Yeah, however
yeah,
you do
that's
it.
the
Yeah. Keep learning. That's the
yeah.
thing. Not reading, keep learning. Yeah.
So, Christina, aquaculture is clearly more than just biology. Increasingly, our sector will be technology, automation focused. We're living through, as we've discussed, the start of the adoption of digital tools, the rise of big data. To succeed, we'll need talented people, passionate for many different types of, technology and lots of different skills. How do we reach all of these people if they've never considered the seas and aquaculture as a potential career pathway for them? How do we reel them in, if you'll forgive the fishing pun?
Yeah. So I think what we need is we need to change the narrative because we are working in the sector, we kind of know that today it involves all these aspects like data science, automizations, monitoring of the environment, etc. But people outside do not realize the fact that aquaculture is quite an interdisciplinary sector and that not everyone has to be a marine biologist or an ichthyologist, but you can be an engineer, etc. So I think what we need is we need the collaboration with the schools, with universities. It's nice to have tech hubs, networks, innovation networks, invite young people to do an internship or a hackathon or be involved in cross-sectorial projects. These kind of things can showcase the fact that we are not just marine biologists, that aquaculture is a complex sector that has an impact in food security. And in this way, we can make people become more excited in following this career.
Yeah. I think you touched on engaging with schools, and one of the things I've kind of thought is that we start too late. We start at university and expect people to kind of develop a passion across their university years. But I've got a 15-month-old son, and he has a favorite red tractor. He doesn't know what farms are, but he has a favorite piece of agricultural equipment. Would that it were something more fish related. Sadly not. But yeah, like the books that he's flicking through, I shan't say reading, that would be a bit bold. Absolutely can have an industrial focus in terms of their farm related or, their car related, all these kind of things. And perhaps 15 months is too young. But, I do think that, starting at university is on the wrong side of that line. And, the younger perhaps we target or start, the easier it will be later on in the journey. Um, Sean, we increasingly see social license as a sectoral challenge. It's being talked about extensively, and indeed, one of the webinar sessions that we're having in this series kind of is going to be dealing with social license. But from a skills perspective, are there new skills that young professionals bring to the table that can support in this area?
Oh, 100%. I definitely think the most obvious one is the use of social media. Obviously, this generation's been brought up with it. The truths and falses on social media, they're a bit more aware of it, and also what social media can do for our brand and our image. Uh, yeah, the other thing, I guess it's more of a New Zealand thing, but it might also be applicable in Canada and other countries. But the younger generation through academia and also through high school is now way more aware of the local indigenous populations, the Māori. It's a huge focus in anything we do now. So yeah, I think that's probably something that young people have been brought up with in New Zealand that perhaps the older generations haven't been brought up with. And in terms of doing anything in aquaculture, you need that sort of social license from Māori.
Absolutely. Social license, absolutely key. And we've heard from Linda about the context in BC, and it's great to know that those discussions are happening in a hopefully quite sophisticated way in New Zealand and becoming increasingly sophisticated over time. Um, so Linda, I guess we'll end the sort of the panelist section with yourself here before we open up to some questions. If you have the right young people in the team, You know, what do you do to enable them? How do you support them? And, what do you do to make them have impact? What's your
Well, yeah. Well, first, I'm if that, thankful. Let's start with thankful, groovy, thankful. But I think what's really important is sharing information. Giving them access to information is important. Don't hoard knowledge or don't hoard information. I think providing context on the organizational goals. You're sitting at an executive table or talking with your board globally in that. You have to have regular structured meetings. Nobody
Mm,
loves meetings, but run a good meeting, run an effective short meeting, but share information with them so they have context, right? You have all these bright brains with all these innovative ideas. Give them the context so they can go away and think about it, right? They're going to be the next you. And, God willing, they're going to be even way better than you are. So I think that's really important. Um, I think it's helpful if you support them to learn time management, right? Project management, time management. I mentioned that already. That's not something that you just know how to do in a corporate environment or a farm environment. And it's important to not let people fail too much, but need to let them fail a bit, right? Like you don't want to see somebody do something that's going to ruin their career. But if they're really keen to something, you gotta give them space to go do it. Like 9 times out of 10, they're going to smash it. They're going to do great. But there's going to be that 10th time where something goes wrong. And that's probably going to learn more from that than the 9 times that they knocked it out of the park. But you have to provide them safety to do that, right? And know that you have their back. Really important. Be generous with your time, right?
mm,
That is your job. Like, you don't have to answer every email, but if you have a staff member or a team member that comes into your door and they need to talk to you, they're your priority. I think I used to say that to all my teams. You guys are my priority, number one, and then everything else. And I made a couple things because I really thought about this. I think this is really important. Let them shadow you. Let them bring them into meetings. If you're in an executive table, say, hey, you know what? I'm going to get
mhm,
this young woman to present this project because she's the one that did the work on it. I could easily do it, but showcase them and work alongside them, work with them. Don't just delegate, sit and work on a project with them. You'll understand where the gaps are and where their strengths are. Honest feedback, super uncomfortable to give, but real leaders will sit someone down because they respect them and say, you're just not meeting the mark here. Like, what's the issue? And this leads into my next thing. Care about them as human beings, know that they have young children, they have a parent with dementia, that, you know, their dog of 15 years just died. Like, seriously, know your team as individuals and humans. I think this is and you're right. The next generation is right about the work-life balance. I think it was Sean that was talking about it. We worked really hard and we missed stuff, right? So I think, you got to find it and that mutual respect. They'll be there when you need them if you're there when they need you. And be firm, be fair. And my last word on all this is be kind. The best leaders are kind leaders and they have compassion. And I'll leave it there.
superb. Excellent.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
you're
Some
welcome.
great thoughts. We've got some awesome questions waiting for you all. I am aware that we're coming up to the end of the kind of scheduled hour, but I think that the panelists have kind of agreed to stay on for a little bit so we can kind of have a bit of that conversation. I understand if you're listening and you don't have the time, then, we apologize and we hope that you have enjoyed listening thus far. But maybe we just crack on into some of those questions and get some of your thoughts. So we've got one here for kind of all panelists. So maybe try to keep your answers brief, but the question's quite complex. So good luck. Activism increasingly targets, globally the salmon sector, which could deter young people from pursuing a career in the sector or decide maybe even to change career paths. How do you think the sector can better recruit and retain talent, especially when they feel that this future might be more uncertain? How do we kind of mitigate that feeling of uncertainty and maybe reframe it as an opportunity? Sean, you've unmuted yourself. Crack on.
Yeah, it's a big topic of conversation over here, and I think one of the things that we've talked about a lot is just being proactive rather than reactive to a lot of media,
Mm,
especially in New Zealand. We get painted with the brush of overseas salmon farming. I say I'm a salmon farmer, people bring up diseases or lice, antibiotics, vaccinations. The company that I work at, well, in New Zealand, we don't have any sea lice straight away. Like just all the stuff that we could be a lot more proactive about and not getting painted with this brush. And our environmental standards, we impose a lot stricter environmental standards than the government imposes on us as an industry. It's just getting these things across proactively rather than reactively. You're always on the back foot when you're reacting. And it's a huge topic of conversation here. And that'll definitely help recruitment for sure.
Linda, jump in.
Yeah, I guess, and honestly, it's hard, but if we resourced communications, public relations, government relations like we do an emerging disease, we would be attracting people to the organization because they'd feel that there was something being done to defend. And
Hmm.
I'm talking about people coming to work or want to stay there. That's tough. That's easy for me to say. In today's climate, when you're fighting a fire on every corner, let's be fair. I'm being fair to everybody, but it is something we need to invest in so that they can see work being done. And it's really critical to people's families because it's hard, right? It's hard for the families too of the employees in an industry that's being attacked. So I think good support for families, good support for local communities where these families live so they can feel the pride in their organization is one thing. I mean, there's 20 things you should do, but there's one idea. Yeah.
Yeah, I think support and proactivity. And I like this idea of considering social license to be almost like an emerging disease threat, right? And mobilize, all teams around it rather than just, the poor comms person, but kind of a multi-team kind of corporate approach rather than one team perhaps. Sean, you mentioned quality so earlier on, and so I'll kind of pick on you a little here. We've got a person asking about how can our industry communicate more clearly and stay focused on the quality of food that we produce without getting drawn into political debate. This person references, having challenges associated with wanting to shout about how great their product is, but maybe feeling nervous about being drawn into a discussion that they feel is maybe n- not highlighting exactly that for them.
Yeah, so, especially in the climate at the moment, everything just gets pulled in that direction. As Linda said, I think the best thing that we can do is just be open and transparent and also put out all the work that we are doing. I think we need to, well, especially in New Zealand, and I'm sure it's the same overseas, we should be way more proud of ourselves. We need to pat ourselves a bit on the back and, yeah, really promote that, really promote the work that we're doing because it is good work. We know it, everyone else should know it. I don't know how that doesn't get pulled into a political debate and seem like we're pushing against that, but I just think being proactive and rather than reactive again, and be proud of yourselves, be proud of our industry, and really promote what the work that we're doing.
I think look, something that I think New Zealand is really good at is kind of promoting New Zealand PLC, like a really strong sort of cultural identity that sells really well to the international market, which is really rooted, in who you are as people. For instance, the sports as a driving passion and, connecting, the All Blacks to kind of like other marketing angles and stuff. We see it in other parts of the world. You can instantly recognize a Kiwi product, because there's always a kind of strong tie back to the country. And I think it's maybe something that the Scots do as well. Tartan on across everything as a way to kind of match people's perceptions of quality around a country to specific products and using that to sell internationally. Um, Gosh, I've got loads of really interesting comments here, guys. You're talking about motivating a team but what about attracting talent, both as employees, but maybe especially as entrepreneurs, creating an entrepreneurial environment for young people? Christina, what about encouraging women to be entrepreneurs in the aquaculture space? Is that something that Noah's kind of tackled, or how do you promote those figures?
As a newly established association, we have not dealt with something like this up to now. However, we have members that have been or are entrepreneurs or consultants. I think what is the problem is that we sometimes we the workers the information doesn't reach the workers, because there are a lot of incubators and a lot of competitions for innovations that could help young people participate, or hackathons where you could even create a business idea with people on the spot and then proceed. So what I think is that the information does not reach us. This is a whole another topic, how we can get more informed on these kind of things. But yeah, I think there are opportunities out there, but for people that would like to work on that, it needs a little bit of trying to find the information, and never be scared to ask, because people that already do it know the drill, so they can help you a lot on that.
Yeah, I think this creating an entrepreneurial space is actually something that the kind of ocean environmental teams are doing around the world. You know, you see sort of microfinance for new ideas and sort of social entrepreneurship finance, lots of competitions about how you could bring a sort of a kind of an ocean sustainable idea, you know, kind of plastic pollution removal, all these kind of things. They're constantly in this kind of seed situation. And I
Yeah,
wonder,
yeah.
you know, how we could try to create something like that for our
I
sector.
mean, if I can jump in and say, in my career, I found out there is a great platform. I think I found out about it in a conference that is called Blue Biomass. And a lot of people say it's only blue economy focused, not necessarily aquaculture, let's say, but people post a lot of opportunities there, and you can find out more about it, about things like that there, about hackathons, about competitions that are running, and there are also working groups. So maybe you can jump in and join a working group and have more targeted conversations there, and more targeted information.
Perfect. Excellent. And what was the name of that? I started
It's
writing and then because I was writing, I couldn't.
blue, yeah, blue biomass. I can send a link in the chat if that's easy.
Superb, excellent. We can maybe send it out to people afterwards if they want to find out more about that initiative, which sounds really interesting. Um, ta-ta. Okay. Is there or can we have a social media platform for connecting aquaculturists throughout the world, including students, scientists, farmers, a hub for people of a shared passion, something like Instagram or LinkedIn, but just for aquaculture? Um, uh, I'm trying to make maybe like a TikTok joke, like fish talk. But you know, what do we think, guys? You know, as these platforms become more sophisticated, do you think we'll start to see sectoral kind of specific applications? You know, a social media platform for those in aquaculture or in train driving, you know, train talk. Do we think we'll start to see these sorts of things coming, or is it always going to be as a subset of the existing platforms? What's the youth feeling?
Christina, you go.
Okay. Well, I actually have seen it. I know that there is something under development, but I don't want to share more information because it's not public yet. But I know that some people are working on it.
Damn, there we go, Sean. It's gonna be tough to follow
Well
that,
done.
mate.
Yeah, well, I definitely
Good
didn't
job.
have as good an answer as that. Shoot.
Excellent. Okay, cool. Well, I look forward to joining that particular social network when it arrives. That's really good. Okay, so maybe a final question here. Um, for all panelists. What can the sector do to better position salmon farming as an innovative, forward-thinking career choice for young talent? Challenge outdated perceptions as a manual, male-dominated, kind of traditional farming sector. What can we do? What would be your kind of final takeaways about what we could do to promote the sector to everyone and not just to the few? Linda, kick us off.
Don't give up. That's the best advice I can give you because I think we're so in it. Well, two things? Not as many people care as you might think about the negative stuff. So make sure that you get equal exposure to positive reinforcement. And though it does exist out there, don't get me wrong. But also, I think we've made a lot of progress. I do believe we are starting to turn the tide. So stay positive, stay engaged, and keep getting involved. Get involved in it and try to motivate your colleagues to get involved too, because every person that speaks up makes a difference because they put a face to the industry. They provide something that's exciting to someone. So, yeah, that'd be my advice. Just hang in there and keep going. Yeah.
Perfect. Excellent. Sean.
Well, I'm just going to talk from a bit of experience in New Zealand. Andrew, I'm sure you've met some of the lovely ladies at Aquaculture New Zealand, but that's an
Hmm.
industry body that most of the farms buy into here, and they sort of represent the industry as a whole, and they're incredible. So I do a lot of work with them. I'll go to high schools and talk a lot about my career. I'll also do lecture events at the universities and stuff. So just getting it out there. They're also really good at we go to all these career days and we have big flyers there of skills required and potential pathways. As it was talked about before, it's actually a really interdisciplinary sector. So we need to reach everyone. We need to reach the engineers. We need to reach the math wizards. We need to reach the marketing geniuses. We need to reach the biologists. We need to reach everyone. And this sort of outreach is, yeah, I think what you can do to do it. And just I've found really useful is just describing what my day to day looks like. I think when I tell people what my day to day looks like, they just think it's the coolest job in the world, which it is. I get to sit on the computer and deal with numbers, and I get to go outside and I get to handle fish. I get to see the dolphins. I get to hang out with seals. You can't really ask for a better job in the world. Yeah, I think
You've sold
promoting
it to me,
ourselves.
certainly. I can
Yeah,
see why you're persuasive in a school environment, Sean. Yeah, where do I sign up?
yeah.
Christina, what do you think? Anything to add to Sean and Linda?
I completely agree. Just a small thing. And I just checked and I can take you back if you want to the previous question because I just checked and it's live, the platform.
Oh, there we go.
So yeah. It's a platform called Buna. And I met them during the World Food Forum because they got an award. And it's a platform. Basically, it's a social media for connecting African aquaculture. But that's a start. I
Oh,
can share
awesome.
also
And
this.
how is that
It's
spelt?
the link. I'm sharing the link. It's Buna.
Buna.
It's
Perfect.
created by
Yeah,
the Rhodes University.
cool.
And this is the aim, basically, to share knowledge within Africa, and not only.
Excellent. Cool. I mean, I think we've talked. I've listened and I've learnt. Thank you very much for sharing all your expertise. Someone here has shared something which I think is a really interesting initiative, and I will share it with those who are still with us or listening on the recording. They reference something called aquaculture in action. Which is a kind of, it seems like a 12th grade aquaculture curriculum focused around recirculating aquaculture systems. Kids raise fish in RAS and learn about tech, biology, plumbing, all the electrical sides of it, etc. And they've shared a link, which I'm sure we can put out as well, so that people can see that awesome kind of school-based initiative. I think that's exactly the kind of thing that will have impact. Thank you for sharing. Unfortunately, that's all we've got time for today. I wanted to once again extend a thank you to Imperial 75 by Cargill for sponsoring the webinar today. A big thank you also to our panelists for their excellent thoughts. I know I've learned a lot today. And finally, also, I want to extend a big thank you to our audience for your questions, your participation, for sharing some excellent initiatives. And yeah, please check out your inboxes and listen to the recording if it's of interest, and share your thoughts also if you want to reach out. This series is brought to you by an initiative called the Next Generation Seafood Alliance in collaboration with Aquaculture in North America. And if you want to find out about either of those organizations, then we're on the web. Perfect. Thank you very much, guys. Have a lovely evening or afternoon or morning, wherever you are in the world.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Well done.